When I think of Sabotage, two things come to mind. The first is the 1994 Beastie Boys music video for Sabotage, but the second is what type of game will Sabotage Studios do next? Sabotage Studios are one of the hottest indie studios around at the moment, and after landing a publishing deal for The Messenger, they were catapulted to the front of the class. Not only does being published by Devolver Digital help you do that, but The Messenger was also a fantastic game. It was a side-scrolling action game deeply inspired by the 8-bit era, more specifically Ninja Gaiden. The Messenger also had a pretty cool party trick up its sleeve, as it was secretly a Metroidvania all along as it transitioned to 16-bit. The Quebec studio followed The Messenger up with a SNES-style classic turn-based RPG, drawing heavy inspiration from Chrono Trigger, which is beloved at the studio. The big difference this time around was that Sabotage Studios was going to be self-publishing, as well as seeing what kind of interest there was on Kickstarter first. Sea of Stars quickly raised over $1 million, which was more than enough to show the studio that there was a strong interest. Fast forward a few years, and Sea of Stars is a critically acclaimed title, sitting in an astounding 98% on OpenCritic. We also labeled it our Indie Game of the Year in 2023, saying at the exact moment where games overstay their welcome, Sea of Stars shifts gears with new locations, new party members, new upgrades, new plot details to unravel, new gameplay, new skills that kept it feeling fresh throughout its 30-hour story that was constantly engaging. With Sea of Stars, not only have they proven not to be a one-hit wonder by stepping into another genre, but without a doubt they have established themselves in elite company with only a handful of other studios. In a brief period of time and just 2 games, Sabotage Studios have made 2 things very clear. They don't like to be boxed in, and they love 90s gaming. Following this pattern, it should become a little easier to narrow down what Sabotage Studios will do for their third game. As they have began with 8-bit and then they evolved to a 16-bit for their second game, it would be a safe presumption to expect their third game to go to the next generation after that, which would be the N64 and PlayStation 1 generation. As Sabotage Studios appears to be a studio that doesn't like to be boxed in by doing the same thing twice, it would also seem sensible to eliminate any Metroidvanias, side-scrolling action, and RPGs. They seem to want a challenge. During the Sea of Stars documentary by The Escapist, Thierry Boulanger, who is the founder and creative director at Sabotage, said, "Moving forward, we are definitely sticking with pixel art. I don't think it's off the table to do a retro 3D like N64 or PlayStation 1. If you take a look at the 90s through the lens of what was popular and what Sabotage haven't already done, you aren't left with too many potential genres, and it comes down to 3 things. First, what genres have Sabotage already explored? 2, what genres were popular during the 90s, specifically the PlayStation 1 and N64 era? And third, what does the market need today? When looking at the 90s, there are 2 genres that were born and exploded in the 90s, but they don't make sense for Sabotage: kart racers and survival horror. Now, despite their popularity then, and even now, they are still somewhat niche. Trying to do one of these games would be limiting potential, and Sabotage need to cast a wide net for the best chance at success. After we evaluated everything, there are 3 potential genres for Sabotage to explore with their third game: first-person shooters, 3D platformers, and stealth espionage. Obviously, Doom is one of the most iconic first-person shooters of all time, which did come out years before the PlayStation 1 and N64 era on the PC, but it still played a very big role during that time. However, each console both offered plenty of original entries in this ascending genre. On the N64, there were games like GoldenEye, which basically catapulted FPS on consoles, as well as Perfect Dark and Turok. Not to be outdone, PlayStation 1 also offered some first-person shooter gems like Medal of Honor that birthed a subgenre which still strongly exists today, as well as games like Alien Resurrection and Power Slave. The N64 and PlayStation 1 era was a revolutionary moment in gaming, with many new genres created during this time frame, and none played a bigger role than the 3-dimensional platformer. Nintendo paved the way with Super Mario 64, and the Nintendo 64 would see other classics like Banjo-Kazooie. PlayStation saw this success and even created an identity around their offerings. Crash Bandicoot from Naughty Dog played a very important role in marketing the PlayStation 1. It wasn't quite the same thing as what Nintendo was offering, but it was 3-dimensional and it was a platformer. PlayStation would also continue to try and compete in this arena with other exclusives like Sparrow the Dragon. The final dark horse of potential genres would be the stealth espionage genre, which truly blossomed during the N64 and PlayStation 1 era. Metal Gear Solid from Hideo Kojima was a watershed moment for the PlayStation that went on to span many sequels still decades long after. On the N64, there were games like Mission Impossible and Winback that didn't fully embrace the stealth aspect, but they were focused around the espionage principles. Back on PlayStation, there were also games like Tenchu and Siphon Filter. Now, before you think Sabotage might be above doing some of these genres, it's important to end on the words of the founder who said, "I guess we'll keep on making what people don't expect." I think all three genres would be really interesting for Sabotage to explore, but if we had to pick one, we would base our decision on their quote about the unexpected. The most expected genre for the studio out of these three options would be the 3D platformer. However, we think that the most unexpected would be the first-person shooter. First, I think the FPS likely cast the widest net, but more importantly, Sabotage seemed like a studio that can offer a lot to the genre. If there is one thing that a lot of first-person shooter games are missing, it's a very strong narrative built around a single-player campaign, and Sabotage have already shown that they can excel at this. Finally, as to try to figure out when we might get to enjoy Sabotage Studios' next game, it would seem sensible to expect this no earlier than 2028. The Messenger came out in 2018 and Sea of Stars came out in 2023. The most basic reasoning is that we have 5 years between these games, and at least part of the studio remained on Sea of Stars to complete the Throes of the Watchmaker DLC, which is coming in 2025 and will also be free. You also have to assume that whatever the studio is working on will be bigger and better than their previous games. Boulanger even said that if the team decide to go down the 3D path, it will just be like the devs in the 90s when they had to learn and figure out how to program in 3D, since Sabotage Studios is a studio built around 2D. Before leaving, consider subscribing if you learned anything new from the video or enjoyed the vibes. If you're unfamiliar, we're trying to cultivate a community full of positivity that's free from toxicity and negativity. That's everything for today, but until next time, be good to your fellow gamer, but be better to your fellow human.